Good evening. My name is Skylar Colburn, and I will be informing my audience today of three different types of poetry: rhyme verse poetry, free verse poetry, and blank verse poetry. After listening to my speech, my audience will have a firm grasp of the different types of poetry. Due to some people being unaware of the different types of poetry, they don't necessarily understand the emotional appeal it has to offer the world. You can change this by attaining knowledge through listening to my speech today. I will begin by first discussing the historical background of rhyme poetry, free verse poetry, and blank verse poetry. The Modern Humanities Research Association explains that rhyme first appeared in the English verse in the early 17th century. Similarly, the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica affirms that free verse poetry became current to English poetics in the late 20th century. Additionally, the editors of Encyclopedia Britannica points out that blank verse poetry was first introduced in the 16th century in Italy. Moreover, now I will discuss how each of these types of poetry works. According to Masterclass, rhyme poetry is a work of poetry that consists of matching vowel sounds in a particular moment. By contrast, Masterclass explains that free verse poetry is a lack of consisting rhyme scheme, metrical pattern, or musical form. A great example of this is a novel by Walt Whitman, and it's called Leaves of Grass. I strongly encourage you to review this novel if you haven't already, as it is a great example of free verse poetry. Additionally, Masterclass reveals that blank verse poetry is written with a precise meter, almost always iambic pentameter. But this is not to say that it must always rhyme, because it does not. A great example of this could be Shakespeare's Sonnet 130. Again, if you have not heard of this poem, I strongly encourage you to review it, as it is a great example of blank verse poetry. To conclude, I am confident to say that my audience should have a firm grasp of the different types of poetry. My audience can now determine the emotional appeal in poems by attaining the knowledge they now know from the three different types of poem discussed within my speech today.